Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu, sitting in for Riz Khan. As US President Barack Obama steps into his second year in office, he's facing considerable pressure over the long-running Afghan conflict. How is the war being fought and can Afghanistan be stabilized? The US has lost around 900 soldiers since 2001 in a long drawn-out war against Al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters. President Obama is increasing the number of US troops from 34,000 to nearly 100,000 for what he calls a war of necessity. But he has also assured a war-weary domestic audience that US troops will start withdrawing from July 2011. When the conflict began, US special forces were dropped into Afghanistan to help guide anti-Taliban forces in the north. But one team, Operation Detachment Alpha 574, became the first American military unit to operate inside Taliban territory in the south. 11 men landed in Uruzgan province and for 3 weeks worked with a little-known tribal leader, Hamid Karzai, to disrupt the Taliban. Today we will examine the war from the perspective of the men who went behind the lines to topple the Taliban. Joining me now in the studio is Major Jason Amarine. He led the US Special Forces team to what's considered the first American victory in the Taliban-held south. Also joining us, Eric Blem, who wrote the book, The Only Thing Worth Dying For: How 11 Green Berets Forged a New Afghanistan. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jason, let me start with you. The book, as we've been talking about, The Only Thing Worth Dying For, takes us back to the days after the 9/11 attacks here in the United States. Now, in November 2001, you were part of that team. In fact, you led the team, ODA 574, that infiltrated into Afghanistan. It was a small team of Special Forces soldiers. What was your mission at the time? The war had already started.
The initial mission of 5th Group and all our teams was to link up with the Northern Alliance. We were going to basically provide air support, help them to work with one another, provide situational awareness to the U.S., and assist them in developing a campaign and executing it against Taliban forces. My team was retasked with linking up with a tribal leader in the south. We're hoping that we could start something in the Pashtun tribal belt, since the Pashtun were the seat of power of the Taliban.
And this was in the south, right?
Yes.
Okay, now at that stage, was the south still in the hands of the Taliban?
Yes, when we first invaded Afghanistan, really the only friends that we had in the country were the Northern Alliance armies fighting from enclaves north of the Hindu Kush Mountains, and we had nothing going on in the Pashtun tribal belt and had doubts about the viability of starting anything down there.
And you teamed up very early in this operation with Hamid Karzai. He was not very well known at that time, of course. What was his role in the operation?
Well, as I said, we were focused on the Northern Alliance. I mean, really everybody assumed that by supporting the Northern Alliance, that would be the key to toppling the Taliban and going after Al-Qaeda in the country. And when Hamid Karzai asked for support, he believed that he could start an uprising within the Pashtun tribal belt and cause the Taliban to collapse from within. It seemed like a very idealistic notion, and to be honest, I don't think many of us really believed it was going to work. And so my team was sent to link up with him and to develop a campaign plan and to see if it was actually viable.
Eric, you wrote the book. How did you get to be involved in this project?
Well, after I finished my last book, I just had a calling, if you will. After 9/11, here I looked at the World War II generation, the greatest generation as it's called in America, and the soldiers, the veterans, were dying off, and there's with them their stories. And I just realized and knew this is history happening around us, and I told my agent I would really like to do something to cover something with the war, something to cover the stories of these men while it's all fresh in their mind. And through a lot of chance, I learned that Jason Amarine was teaching at West Point. And I went and off and asked their public affairs officer to sit in on a class, and found out 5 years later, it was late 2005, that the story had never been told. And it was just amazing to me that, you know, having followed the war, that it hadn't been told yet, and I took that as an opportunity to dive deep into this particular mission.
So even at that stage, you knew of the existence of this group and what they had done there?
Yes.
And then how did you go about researching it?
Well, I wanted to make sure that I got the story from the perspective of the men on the ground. I had read some of the articles, and there were interviews with some of the men after the mission, and of course I'd heard about Hamid Karzai by that time. And I realized that so many of the stories were just regurgitated quotes from the same press conferences over and over again, and there really wasn't anything substantial that told the full story. By doing my research, I found out that within 3.5 weeks, this virtual unknown, Hamid Karzai, really on the world stage, virtual unknown, obscure, exiled statesman, goes from obscurity to the interim leader of a post-Taliban government in Afghanistan. During that same 3.5 weeks, from the first time this team met him, every member of that team was either wounded or killed. And I just looked at that and thought, 3.5 weeks, so much happened. Let me focus on that 3.5 weeks. Those are the bookends of this story. And I knew there was something great.
And Jason, we often hear a lot about the work of special forces, and a lot of it is romanticized in movies and in books and things like that. I mean, there's been too many Chuck Norris movies about this. But in reality, when you embarked on this mission, what went through your mind? What were the dangers that you were going to be facing?
The whole challenge for special forces is building rapport, with our counterparts. And in this case, we had to develop a great deal of trust in them and build their trust in us very quickly, since we're going to be way behind enemy lines, where if they wanted to sell us to the Taliban, they could have actually made a lot of money. So it really focused on getting to know them as individuals and having them get to know us. We couldn't just be the Americans. I had to be Jason. They couldn't just be a leader and his men. It had to be Hamid, it had to be Bari Ghul, it had to be all of our guerrilla fighters, as we would get to know them one-on-one. I mean, really for us, in the first hours on the ground, we were either going to be accepted or we were going to be betrayed and turned over to the Taliban. So there was a great deal of pressure in trying to figure out how to relax and build real friendships with these people.
And did those doubts go through your mind all the time, that the fact that you were working with a group of people whom you did not know, and that you could be betrayed at some point?
In the initial planning, that was definitely in the back of my mind. Once we got on the ground, that was where I think a little bit of instinct, a little bit of training took over. But at the same time, Hamid Karzai is just such a welcoming, warm person that he put all of us at ease. Everybody definitely developed a quick respect and a liking for him, and that made our job a great deal easier. He accepted us, and so all of his subordinates accepted us very quickly.
Eric, special forces are by the nature of their work a very secretive group. They don't often discuss what they do, and you certainly won't find them in front of television cameras at the best of times. Now, was that a difficulty for you as a writer to get their trust and to get them to open up to you?
I think it was all about baby steps, really, and that started with talking to the parents and family members of the men on the team who didn't come home. I was able to meet with a father of one of the sons, went to his grave, slept in his son's bed, saw his medals, pored over photos and stories, and at the end of a full weekend at this home, he told me, Eric, what I want you to do, if you can, is tell the story like it happened. Talk to as many men as you can on the team. Don't candy coat it. Just tell it like it happened. That is the best way you can honor my son and the mission. And from that, starting bottom line with the parents, really just, he gave me an email and I would go to the next person and each door would open another door. And I was able to go all the way back to literally the planning that happened just 2 hours after the Twin Towers fell, all the way to the very end of the mission, and there were some incidents that I won't spoil, but where there was a rescue operation.
I'm going to go to an email which came to us from Nigeria. This was written by Muhammad Mahdi Saeed. Jason, I'm wondering if you could answer this. He asks, have they, meaning the United States, have they really defeated the Taliban? And I think it brings us right up to today, doesn't it?
Sure. Well, I think it's clear that the Taliban hasn't been defeated. One issue, though, is always how do you define the Taliban? One of the biggest mistakes we make is to treat the Taliban as a unitary actor. We often forget that there's an Afghan brand of Taliban, there's a Pakistani band of Taliban. And when you just look at the Afghan Taliban, there are so many different allegiances there as well. In some cases you have a hardcore ideology. In other cases excuse me, you have really Taliban by tribal association and tribal loyalty. And the key to really defeating the Taliban in Afghanistan is based upon understanding all of those linkages and understanding all of the issues and seeing what you can to actually handle each of them. As I say, as opposed to looking at the Taliban as if it is this one massive army that we're going to defeat, because it doesn't work that way. Okay,
we are going to take a short break right now. More of our discussion in just a moment. We'll be right back. Stay with us.